Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this discussion about district charter collaboration across the country. I'm thrilled to be moderating this discussion. My name is Romy Drucker. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the 74 News Network. We're a network of news sites focused on K-12 education across the U.S. I'm going to have all of our panelists introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their experience with district charter collaboration work, and then we'll jump into a conversation and open it up for questions towards the end. Alex, do you want to get us started?
Sure. Hi, Alex Shub. I'm the CEO and founder of School Empowerment Network. I did most of my work in my career in New York City as a teacher, assistant principal, founding principal of a new small school, and then ran the Office of New Schools for 4 years when we opened 120 district schools. So we had a partner in our division, the portfolio division, that focused on the charter openings. So since that time, new administration in New York, no more new district schools opening. We've pivoted our work in New York to helping people open new charter schools. And in both phases of the work, while we were opening new district schools, we had a lot of folks coming with charter experience who were interested in moving into the district sector for one reason or another. Now that we're pivoting back to charter work, we're going to the best principals of the district schools we started and asking them to nominate talent from the district world to now move into the charter sector. So there's been plenty of back and forth, and to me the work has been much more about where there's space for innovation and protection for people to do work that's really going to help kids more than whether it has the district or charter label, although that space is more commonly found in the charter sector around the country.
Hi, my name is Deandre Weaver. I am a community superintendent in Spring Branch ISD. Community superintendent essentially is an area superintendent. There are 3 of us. We are responsible for a third of Spring Branch. Spring Branch is located in Houston, Texas. It's about 35,200 students, very diverse school district with a highway that divides our district into almost 2 separate districts, and we've been working really hard to bring those districts together as one. We are a district that has been committed to innovative practices, and we're here to talk about our learnings from the SKY partnership. So several years ago, former Superintendent Duncan Klusman and the CEOs of KIPP and Yes Prep decided to come together to create what is called the SKY partnership. So Spring Branch, KIPP, Yes Prep. These 3 entities, Spring Branch, KIPP, Yes Prep, came together and said, hey, let's collaborate and let's provide great learning opportunities for the students in Spring Branch. So they entered into a really good collaborative agreement to do just that. I've been in Spring Branch for almost a year now. Prior to Spring Branch, I was a high school principal in Chicago Public Schools, and assistant principal, English teacher, AVID coordinator, and really excited to be here.
Hi, good morning. I'm Marcia, and I'm the CEO of KIPP LA Schools. We have 14 schools in South and East Los Angeles serving just about 6,000 students. District charter collaboration in Los Angeles is interesting, and I'd say at this moment is pretty much on hold. You may have read in the 74 or one of its sister organizations, the LA School Report, we're in the midst of a pretty heated battle. With the district, or over a school board race. $11 million has been spent on our school board race. Remember, we're the 2nd largest district in Los Angeles County, which mostly is served by LA Unified, is the 8th largest state if we were standalone in the country. That being said, there are a lot of things that we're trying to do to build bridges, and I think once we get past the election next week, there's a desire to try to come together and create better collaboration. And we've created something called the Los Angeles Advocacy Council that's trying to work with the district to improve the overall relationship and how the district charter collaboration could work.
Hi, my name is Mira Browne. I'm the Chief External Officer at Summit Public Schools. We are a charter management organization with 11 schools in California and in Washington State. We also are a school partnership organization in that we work with over 130 schools across the country and providing them the tools and resources to bring personalized learning into their classrooms and into their schools and districts. About over 70% of those schools that we work directly with and that we partner directly with are district schools. So the majority of our work are with a whole host of very diverse districts across the country in 27 different states. Our work has evolved. It really did start when we opened our doors. Our doors have always been open. It's something that we believe deeply in as a charter network. To our peers, charter, district, it didn't matter to us, to come and visit, see our classrooms, get under the hood. And from there, it sort of evolved into folks saying, hey, can we try your curriculum? Sure, we'll send you a Google Doc, here's our curriculum, to doing webinars, to all sorts of different activities until we really formalized, I think, an authentic way to partner through our Summit Learning Program, where schools directly partner with us. Like I said, we provide the tools and the resources, and they run with it in their own communities, contextualized to what their community needs, and it's an ongoing partnership. So we're going into our third year of that starting next year.
So this is kind of a funny conversation in some ways, because educators and schools sharing best practices is certainly not a new idea. That's been happening forever. But more and more attention is being paid to district charter collaboration. More than 24 districts across the country have signed compacts to work together to facilitate this kind of sharing. The Every Student Succeeds Act has provisions in it that allow for some of this cross-sector sharing and collaboration. But I want to start with a question. Given all of the challenges that we all face every day in setting our students up for success, is this conversation about district charter collaboration even worth it? Like, should we even be talking about this? Is this even on the list of top 3 priorities? And Deandre, I want to start with you and really root this in sort of your perspective as a community superintendent of a local district. Why is this worth your time?
So yes, it is definitely a priority. One, because charters and district schools have responsibilities for the kids in our system. I mean, most kids are going to be in a charter or privately run school or a traditional public school. And what I found is that everyone wants to do the right thing by kids, and they have an idea of how best to do that, and everyone always kind of goes in it alone. And so having a conversation about bringing and pulling resources, best practices that are prevalent in district-run schools, best practices that are prevalent in charter-run schools, makes the world of sense. Because ultimately, the goal is for kids to learn, to have opportunities beyond what they can envision. And what we also see is a lot of outsourcing of, in some places, the responsibility to educate our most neediest students, because sometimes we don't necessarily know how to do that well in a district environment. So district folks need to learn from charters. What are you all doing differently that is seeing success for students that allows you to replicate and scale your models? And I think that was the purpose of the Sky Partnership in Spring Branch, is that there were learnings that we wanted to gain from KIPP and from Yes Prep, and there were things that we were doing in Spring Branch that KIPP and Yes Prep absolutely wanted to benefit from. And the ultimate goal was to learn a lot, but then to also share those learnings across the country. And we've seen a ton of success with our model, both in terms of building teacher and leadership capacity, because we're all sharing and providing professional development together, but then also in student achievement, where student achievement is going up in both district-run schools and is sometimes outperforming their charter counterparts, but then also in our charter-run portion of our schools, and they're outperforming their district counterparts. So we're seeing success, and that lets us know that it's definitely the right conversation.
What about from your perspective, Mira? Because you're doing a lot of the sharing, and that's not to say that you're not taking away a lot of lessons learned. But is it worth it? Is it worth it? Summit has been scaling at a rapid pace. You have highly successful schools across multiple states. Is this worth it for you?
So I'd say yes, to agree with you. But I think it also depends on how we're defining the it. if the it is solely to say that we can get past sort of, I think, these false lines that have been created in our mutual work around whether you're a district or a charter, then no. If the it is that there is a common shared value and belief about what we want for kids and the outcomes we're driving for kids, and an acknowledgement that we're going to get there with a lot of diverse talent and voices at the table, and that we all have something to offer and to learn from each other, and then if we share our resources and share our learnings and find a really authentic way to partner so that's best for all kids, then absolutely. I mean, I can give you an example in that Summit. Again, we have 11 schools, about 3,500 students, and in the past 2 years, we've been able to directly impact 20,000 students purely through working with districts and charters across the country. They're doing the hard work. We're providing support. We're learning a ton from them as well. But that's a big jump, and that allows us to really get to more community support, more kids, and I think that's what we all want.
I want to ask the New York and LA folks where the politics are turned up the same question. Is it worth it? Is it possible? Marcia, you said it's on hold a bit. So how do you think about investments you're making through the Advocacy Council? And similarly in New York, I mean, the climate sort of goes back and forth. There is a lot of collaboration happening now, in particular in one district in Brooklyn. I think that's really taking the lead on this. Is it worth it?
I think it's worth it, particularly if we think about who we're serving, right? And our parents have kids in our schools and they have kids in traditional public schools. And so I think from that lens, it absolutely is. And I also think from the lens of, to Mira's point, like, how are we going to continue to all get better? And the reality is, while the charter sector, it's the largest charter sector in the country in LA, we still, serve 20% or less of students. And so there are many, literally hundreds of thousands of kids that need high-performing schools. And we don't have, I don't think it would be the right thing anyway. We don't have the capacity to serve all those children. And so how are we trying to work together to raise the quality of education for all students? And I think, if we get the election behind us and we take a step back and figure out and re-ground ourselves in what's important, which are the children and the future of Los Angeles, hopefully we can find common ground to move forward again.
So I would say I think the scarcest resource that everybody is looking for is talent. And I think the further you move up the sort of leadership ladder within schools and organizations, the scarcer the resource becomes. So we don't just work in New York, we're also trying to help some successful charters expand in other parts of the country, and also doing some turnaround and leadership development work with really struggling districts. And in most cases, the leaders that we find who are ready to do something substantially different have spent time earlier in their career working in a highly successful school. They have experienced firsthand where the bar needs to be to push the kids for achievement. And that is not something you're going to learn in a year-long program. That's not something you're going to learn by attending a webinar or even visiting. I mean, we've been working in Detroit, and a lot of leaders were repeatedly taken to visit uncommon schools, and it made a big impact on them, but it did not enable them to turn around and enact this school setup and system when they returned home. And as we all know, too many of the most struggling and failing schools have a real stagnant culture and low expectations that are really hard to shift. So what we're always looking for are leaders who have experienced that high bar, and I think in places all around the country, we can find those folks in charters. Now the charters do not have the capacity to be giving people away. Like, they need to put all their resources into meeting their own leadership needs at this point and trying to expand. So I would love to see a real investment in leadership development happening in our highest performing schools, which more often than not are charters, and then figure out a way to make it cost effective or like a value add so that charters can then share those leaders with their neighboring district schools. So I think really the sharing is, in most cases, it's the charter schools that should be doing the incubating and the growing of the talent, and it's the districts that often have the money that is being burned in like wholesale leadership development programs that could redirect that to really support these bright spots from a kind of portfolio perspective.
So I want to talk a little bit more about that point and this culture of sharing and who's driving it inside of each of your organizations. I don't think Dave Levin and Duncan Klusman woke up one day and said, I want to work with charters, or I want to find a way to partner with the district. Does it bubble up from classrooms? Is there a culture of feedback around, like, we're trying to find a way to teach this better, or we want to learn how to do something differently? How did it, and Mira, I want to start with you, but how did it start to percolate inside of Summit? Was it Diane just had a light bulb moment, or did you start to hear from educators across the network, like, we have something to share?
It's a good question. So I think in our case, we're 15 years old. And from day one, when Diane did found Summit Public Schools, our first school Summit Prep, it was already part of our culture and our DNA. It was something that was super important to Diane. It was super important to our school leaders and to our culture. And so it is something that has been brought up from day one, of this idea of, we have the opportunity there is an opportunity to learn and share. I think the biggest question is just how do you do that in a really authentic way? So it was in our culture, throughout. And I think it finally, when we, like I said, we had a lot of different iterations of how we were trying to do that, keeping our doors open, making sure people can come in. And so that is definitely an org-wide shared philosophy and value of sharing and collaboration. It's something, like I said, that is just so deep to Summit and so deep to how we operate, even just amongst our own schools and amongst ourselves, no less amongst our peers and charters and our peer educators in district schools. And then from there, like I said, it shifted to instructional approaches and curriculum and sharing of Google Docs and folders and whatever we could back and forth. And then from there, it turned into, hey, a group of us did say, like, it would be really fantastic if there was a more formal way for us to be able to do that. So I would say that it started with our mission and has evolved throughout the entire organization. It is certainly driven by our teachers, by our school leaders, and our leadership. And I think that that's probably the most effective way for true sharing and collaboration to happen.
So I struggle with this idea of sharing a lot. And so the rational side of me is like, yes, absolutely. You do great work in this area, you take those ideas, you scale it, you share it. I think the rebel in me is like, that's not it. I think it's how do we bring the smartest people together to share around a common problem? Mm-hmm. Like shared problem solving, I think, is much more where we need to go and less about, this worked here, you should try this over here. One of the things that we're doing in Spring Branch, which is really unique, is that we're trying to completely redesign 48 campuses using design thinking. So every single campus is going to go through a process with their community, with their parents, with their students, with various people to try to figure out, like, what problems are we really trying to solve together. It's not a district that's saying you need to increase student achievement, or you need to provide a more equitable space for your Black and brown children. But here's a process that we're gonna go through for you to figure out what your problem is, and we're gonna support the heck out of whatever you come up with. I think we should be thinking about, at this level, how do we bring the best people from places like Summit, places like Uncommon Schools or Spring Branch or Chicago or New York, in their particular environments, and have them problem solve solutions around that. So what works best in Houston and Spring Branch may or may not work best in Palm Beach, Florida. But if we can take the same process we use to figure it out and to collaborate and scale that process, that might be a better solution. So I've not landed anywhere formally with that, but it's an idea that I'm tinkering with right now is, are we constantly doing the same thing and thinking we're going to get a different result? Even if we do have the best people and we put them in some of the places that need them the most, do they have a model that, will actually scale and do the type of impact work that our public education system really needs? I'm not sure.
Can I add?
Yeah.
Sorry, two quick
Please.
examples. So that does include Spring Branch, and I totally agree with you. So the way that, what we have seen in our partnership and our work is when you're able to actually partner around, to your point, a problem that you're trying to solve, when you clear the politics and bring teachers together into a room, which we do 3 times a year, all of our teachers from a whole host of different regions and school leaders come together. And like I said, it starts with a shared sort of philosophy and belief and value around the outcomes we're driving for kids. There's a common language that we're using. And they're doing the work of figuring out how to solve that problem. And then they are bringing it back to their community, into their schools, contextualizing it for themselves. But they're doing that work together, and I just don't think there's anything more powerful than putting trust and belief in sort of teachers and school leaders to roll up their sleeves, which is what they do best, and figure it out together and have a lot of different diverse voices from different regions, different communities, but who are all grappling with the same problems. And I think another example is we have a partnership with Lindsay Unified School District in Central Valley, California. So you think, oh, California, but very different from sort of Silicon Valley, California, where we live, and it's very similar. We are focused in on building instructional practices and things that include the classroom and teaching methods and things like that. That then we're trying to codify and provide to everyone and anyone who wants that. And so I think that there's just different ways that districts and charters, but really just teachers and school leaders and educators can work together.
I think an interesting thing is that we live in sort of different ecospheres, right? So sharing with, our cousins across KIPP or with Uncommon or AF or Noble, yes, whatever, that happens all the time. It's so rare. I was just recently at a convening at the Broad, with the Broad Superintendent Academy, where we were talking about equity through advocacy, and it included charter leaders and traditional public school leaders, and we were all in the same room for 2 days. And after that, it was like, wow, I don't think there's ever been a time where I have sat in a room like that. It was small, we're just around a boardroom with leaders who were doing my job at traditional public schools. And I think that's part of the problem. Like, as charter leaders, we get together multiple times a year in various different venues, but it's rare that we have that intersection. And to realize, like, the problems we're facing are very similar to their problems.
I would just add, I think it's crucial that the district schools have the protection from the district and the space to innovate, to level the playing field. Right? When I started as a teacher, I worked in a very innovative district school, and when the superintendent would come, it was like duck and cover, put up the fake posters, do the dance, and then he leaves and go back to doing the good work. And there were a bunch of little hideouts like that in New York, and there were always these pockets of innovation in districts, but the district is typically squeezing them out. So I think, in a lot of places, there really isn't opportunity for sharing. Like, the charters can't hand over these practices because the district schools can't do them with fidelity. Or because of the lack of innovation that's being promoted in the district, you just have smarter, more innovative people going to the district sector. And so they don't necessarily want to sit down and learn from what's happening in the schools that have been failing to serve kids effectively for however long it's been. So I think that is a fair statement, right? Like, we have to create a space where there's mutual respect, opportunity for learning. And where we have that in New York, like, the smartest principals I know who work in charters and district schools get together on their own just to talk about what they're doing. They don't care whether they're a charter or district school, they just want to know how to make things better. So as long as there's really, like, the chance for cross-pollination to take root, it doesn't feel like wasted time. Otherwise, I don't think the charters owe a favor to the district schools.
And I think what makes that work is when you have leaders that understand and get that, and they're willing to put their egos aside and put politics aside to say, I need help, you do this well, help me with this so that our kids can be great. And that's what our former superintendent and other folks did when they created the Scott Partnership. It's like, let's come together, let's do this for kids in Houston. And then you see in Texas now there's legislation where we're actually one of the first school district to apply for. It's called District of Innovation. So essentially that gives us the autonomy like a charter operator would have, where we can exempt ourselves from policies, state policies that would impede innovation from happening. And so as a district, we've just exempted ourselves from 99% of all the policies that could potentially prevent an innovative practice from occurring in our district. Again, empowering our board, our leaders, our school leaders, and our students to say, this is a problem for us. I don't learn well in a 7.5-hour day. I actually need I learn best at nighttime because I could be working to help support my family during the daytime. Why can't we provide an educational experience for that student that meets that kid where he or she is? That type of thinking didn't come to our district until we had that kind of collaboration from the charter partnership to show us what possibilities could exist if we just thought differently about the work. And so, not to really simplify this at all, but I think it really starts with people putting egos aside to say, let's come together. You do this well, we do this well. What if we came together and we can do all these things much better for kids?
So I want to come back to the politics, but ask a little bit more on some of the problem solving that is happening, whether it's on the books or off the books. You talked a little bit about talent, Alex. Personalized learning is obviously an area that folks are buzzing about and trying to figure out, like, what do we do? How do we think about this? Maybe we have the resources, maybe we don't. What are some of the areas, you know, more specifically, where you've seen some interesting problem solving, whether it's the talent pipeline issue, or, you know, instructional practices for hard to serve students, students with disabilities. I know you all have both experienced some of that change within your own districts, but also had the chance to visit other districts where some of this collaboration is happening. Like, what have you seen that's inspired you and also reinforced for you that this is worth it?
Can I talk about what I would like to see?
Yes, you
that I hope would inspire us all.
Is there anything you have seen?
I mean, these informal meetings, but nothing
Okay,
that's a particular program.
I think what they're doing in Denver, where they have, I was just there with KIPP in Colorado, and they have actually a group that comes together from the district side and the charter side, and there's been a lot of stability within that group. And importantly, 2 board members also serve on that panel, and I think that's something that's powerful because there's been the stability, the board members get to know the charters and understand the charters, and we've seen, sort of self-reported from my colleague in KIPP, we've actually seen people move and be like actually defending charters within the district as a result of that. So I think that's one area. I think actually, you know, I talk about LA being contentious, but we've done a lot of great work around special ed. I think we're worried with the budget context if that will stay, but the work that we've done with our SELPA, which is our special ed, I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but it's local district something. I think that's been really powerful, and we've seen the percentage of students with special needs really increase across charters as a result of that. I know we've gone from, you know, probably 5 years ago, we were at like 5 or 6%. We're now at about 11, moving to 12, and we have some schools that are at 20% special ed because we have a lot of flexibility and we have some support from our SELPA.
So you've been able to increase enrollment of those students because...
Yeah, and better serve them, and that's actually, we do have a compact in LA. We're probably not the highest performing compact city, but that is where our compact is centered around our special needs.
So I can give an example of a specific district we're working with, but I would say that out of, you know, the 130 plus schools that we work with currently, they certainly come for a variety of different reasons.
And are you picking schools or are schools picking you?
Schools are picking us. So, you know, teachers, school leaders, district leads are out looking, curriculum coaches, instructional coaches are out looking for how do I better serve our ELL population, right? Or what are some instructional approaches that, or look fors we can use, you know, in classrooms to better meet, you know, every single child exactly where they are. I mean, there's just a whole host of things that we're all dealing with. And so they opt in. all we ask is, it's a free program, so there's no cost, there's no barrier. We ask for a philosophical alignment. So, do you truly believe that kids should own and drive their own learning? Are you committing to doing project-based learning in your classroom so kids can really focus on developing their cognitive skills, critical thinking and such? Are you committed to ensuring that every single child has a mentor, a teacher mentor, an adult in the building that will meet with that student weekly and mentor that child through, or a student through their long-term goals or short-term goals, reflection, what they're working on, their habits of success? So we ask for sort of a commitment on that, and that's it. And from there, they opt in. But one district that I can sort of give an example of is Pasadena, Texas, and they came to us, a group of teachers and a district lead came to us 3 years ago. They were on the search for, they were certainly had blended learning at the time or personalized learning on their mind of, is this something we can bring to the district that can help us serve our 55,000 students with high ELL and high FRL? And they found us, and it started sort of similarly as I was saying with come to California, visit our schools. We're happy to fly out to you and talk to you about what's happening in the district. Then they joined the Summit Learning program, and it's evolved. We're moving into our third year with them, where they have literally taken it and they have a vision for their district that is their vision. It is very much sort of school leader, teacher driven, as much as to your point as it is district. District leads have to clear barriers for folks to be able to do this work. They've brought their instructional coaches into it, who are now building their own internal capacity to do the work themselves without the need of Summit or the resources that we provide, and we're just continuing to be sort of their coach when they need us, type of thing. So I think it's an example of a district who's out looking for something different. They had a vision of what they wanted for their 55,000 student district. They had their own challenges. They found us. We were happy to partner with them, and they're taking it and they're running it with it, and it's their own.
So first and foremost, our student achievement is going up in the schools and for the kids that need it the most. The schools that became part of the Sky Partnership were schools that were on the verge of being improvement required in the state of Texas, so some of the lowest performing schools. And just a little bit more about the Sky Partnership. So KIPP and Yes Prep co-locate in 2 middle schools and a high school. So those charter schools are in the schools that in which they are collaborating. And so one of the kind of qualitative experiences and joys for us is when that model first existed, it was almost like 2 separate schools, where the charter school came in and we have our own mascot, our own colors, and we do things this way. It was almost a traditional kind of co-location model. Toward the end of that year, they realized that didn't work. That again, we're trying to collaborate and intertwine and not necessarily just share space, but we wanted to be as one as possible. And so eventually that charter and the other charters removed their separate colors and mascots and just became one with the school. That led to teachers wanting to, and the principals creating structures where the teachers in both traditional and charter collaborated together on defined dates. So their school improvement days or professional development times, they would have that together. They created co-agendas where they learned the same things. They employed the same data practices. They met as professional learning communities together because they were, again, trying to attack the same problem. It was helping this particular group of students at this school in this area be successful. The principals meet often on a regular basis to problem solve. And so we're super excited to see that a completely separate, a few years ago, separate organizations have come together, not just on paper, but in terms of the actual day-to-day practice, so they can do great things for kids. And we're seeing that, and as a result of that work, we are sharing leaders. And so leaders that are successful in one charter organization within our partnership may take a principalship in the district or at a different school. And that just happened as recently as last week. We hired someone that was in one organization, and because of our partnership and our kind of congruence together, wanted to lead that work in a different organization. So not only are we developing our bench or our pipeline for leadership, but we're doing it together. There are also district folks that go over and lead in our charter organization. So we're growing our own, and we're seeing results, and we're doing it in a way that is healthy for all three organizations. Our superintendents get together for breakfast once a month to kind of talk about big picture ideas. So those leaders are coming together. So when we talk about a true partnership, I mean, it's almost a marriage. It's this idea that two, actually in this case three, and sorry we're in Utah, so three people are coming. Sorry, that was a bad joke. That three individuals, three different organizations are coming together to kind of be one. And it's a process and it happens over time, but we're definitely seeing the benefits of that. And that model has started to expand in the Houston area with other districts. Not as strong, of course, but expanding nonetheless.
Would you like to share what you're hopeful about, Alex?
Well, I mean, I think that is amazing, and that is, to me, the dream, but that requires incredible, I don't even know what, artful work on the part of yourself and the other superintendents to really create an open and receptive mindset on the part, I'm going to assume, of the districts who are probably, at least initially, receiving most of the new practices from the charter. If that's a wrong assumption,
it is,
I'd
yeah.
love to hear that.
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, I think earlier in the partnership it was, but as the organizations in each school started to come together to problem solve their unique challenges, this idea of continuous learning kind of happened almost organically. So when you are presented with data that your kids in this school that you all are serving are performing at this level, what are you all doing about it? I think the learning kind of happened on both ends of the spectrum. And so it wasn't the charter come in and say, hey, we know better and we're doing better. And it wasn't the district saying that you don't know better. It was these two entities coming together and saying, let's figure this out together. And I think that humble approach really set the stage for true learning to happen. Because one organization, one set of teachers, one set of principals did not feel as if they were being taught or that they had to sit and learn, but they felt a part of a team. And so I think if you can create that type of partnership where people feel like they're in it together and they're not just the recipients of learning, almost like we don't want to just give students stuff. We don't want to just tell them what they need to learn. We want them to be a part of the learning process. That actually has to happen with adults too. And it has to happen in district and charter partnerships. So if the partnership is one-sided, if it's you giving all the time, that's not great in a marriage. It's also not good in a district charter partnership either. There has to be some rules that say that we're going to equally broach this topic together. Here are the things, here are our norms and collective commitments around that. I think when you can establish that type of playing field, the sandbox is much easier to play in.
Can I just add something to that? I agree with you. It can't be, 2 or 4. It has to absolutely be with. And I'll just give an example of, it certainly started with, hey, here's this approach that we've developed. And it would not be where it is today without teachers and school leaders at different district schools who, quite frankly, were doing certain things, approaches better, and that we were learning from. And so I remember, when our chief schools officer went and visited one of the schools and called up our CEO and was just like, you have to come see this. Like, what they're doing in this classroom in Pasadena is amazing. We should absolutely be doing this at Summit, And so it is that learning together. It is certainly potentially, it starts with, hey, we have this idea, or hey, we're doing this, or hey, here's a tool and a resource. But I don't think Summit Learning as an approach to teaching and learning would be where it is today, certainly without what we've learned and what folks from districts and charters across the country have brought to it. And we incorporate that, and we change the teaching practice. And then we shoot it out to all of the 130 plus schools. And so I would agree with that.
And I think on the flip side, and to Summit's point, because we have 2 schools that have gone through the Summit process, and they absolutely love it, and our district's really excited. And then my former high school, which the principals in the audience, is also part of that Summit model as well. The point is, if you have something that works, like, let's use it, bring it to the table. Summit works. Like, there's clear data that students perform better, they have better opportunities as a result of going through this more personalized model. Like, yes, let's bring that, and let's figure out how do we make it work in our environment. And I think that's the flexibility that Summit provides schools and districts, and I think that is a part of the puzzle.
But so just to push a little bit, and just to be clear, my context is in like typically really failing district schools. So that's where I come in the door. So there's not often, you got to look really hard to find the thing that you want to share with somebody else that's going on in those schools. Besides, like, I don't know, metal detectors. So I think, to be frank, like, we're bringing in charters into these situations to provide a different and better structure that is not existent there. And once we start implementing it and other people are copying it, there may be lessons learned about how to tinker with it. But it's not like a green field where we're sitting down with the district principal and saying, like, let's reinvent Mastery's tools. Like, what do you think the best approach is? We're saying, look, here's a pretty well-baked set of things that go together, use them, and we're open to your feedback. So I just think it's different than the idea of like a real one-to-one collaboration where people are inventing something together.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an important point, right? Like, the context matters so much. The school leader capacity matters so much. The willingness has to be there, the trust, the openness, the data-driven mindset, right? I'm hearing a lot of you say, like, if the data is there, I mean, you can make the case for this kind of sharing. I want to ask where parents fit into this, and then talk a little bit about the conversation you have with them about it. Like, are they clued in? Are they not clued in? Do you see them as advocates in this conversation around sharing? Does that have a potential to change the conversation about high quality schools for all students, period, and stop, and sort of get us out of this sort of district versus charter mentality? Can parents be the wedge for that? Is that even a consideration set in some of the work you do, some of the advocacy and politics of what that sharing means and suggests about common goals for students, period? It's not me versus you. It's not where we've got autonomy, you don't. It's we want all school kids to succeed, period. We have a common goal, period. So I'm interested in hearing a little bit about that, and then I want to open it up for questions.
So we don't do the parent piece extremely well. I mean, that's an area that we think is a huge area of opportunity for us. Which is why we're going through the design thinking process. One, as a district, in our strategic plan was created using the design thinking approach, but also as we think about redesigning schools and really going through that empathy process with all stakeholders. And so to give parents a much more authentic voice in what has been done in places that think that they do it well, is how do we authentically include parents in the process of creating what is going to be great for them and their families, and not necessarily just, again, giving them options, but including them in the process. And I think that's work that we want to do better, and hopefully we will have a better answer.
Sorry, did I interrupt you? From our seat, I mean, absolutely parents are part of the conversation, I think in a slightly different way. And what I mean by that is, certainly when schools start the Summit Learning Program and are bringing personalized learning practices, it feels very different. And so the identity of the student changes, the language that their child is using changes, the role of the parent changes, and so there is a lot of work that we do with schools to support them, since we went through that change management process ourselves with our own families, on how to empower your parents and how to ensure that they feel like they're part of that process and that they understand what their child is doing. We have a platform that all of our schools use as a tool to do this work, and parents have their own login. And so, but even that in itself is interesting in that it's a lot more information than I think most parents ever have. They literally know what's happening in the classroom every single day. They know how their child is doing in that moment in time. So a lot of our work with families is very much on that side of just what does that mean for me as a parent, and how do I support my child, and how do we work together, and how do I work with my child's mentor, and how do I ensure I'm part of that conversation as well, and I'm supporting my child as they're setting goals and working towards their aspirations and such. But I think what's interesting is I'm not sure how aware sort of parents in Pasadena or across the 27 states are that a charter and a district, for example, are working together to give their child this great experience. I think they're very aware, though, when they say, just question sort of school district, is my kid doing this next year? Because I want my child to keep doing this next year. So I just want to make sure that what my child's doing in 9th grade, they get to do in 10th grade. And I think there's so much power to that, because it's not about again, sort of where this came from or where this experience came from. It's just about my kid's happy, my child's engaged, my child's motivated, they're setting goals, they're so self-aware. My child's a different child, and I want my child to continue learning in this way. And I think that's what we want parents advocating for, is that quality of an experience. And I think we're starting to see that. And again, it transcends lines, sort of typical lines that I think we see in the conversation.
So in New York, I think the barrier to people doing that is that parents are set against each other. So the kids who are in the successful charter, the parents in the district school say, oh, your school is stealing resources from our school, and that's why your kids are having a better experience than our kids are. So I think something that's been explored there that they haven't gotten to yet, but I think could be the magic bullet, is a common enrollment process. So that every kid, because within the district schools even, there's a portfolio approach you can apply to any of the schools in the city, and there are the X% at the top of the most sought after schools that get 15,000 applications for 300 seats. Everybody wants to get in there, and somehow the charters aren't necessarily thought of in that same conversation, even though you could go join all those lotteries. So if you put in one application and you got into that charter and I didn't, and now you're the have and I'm the have not, but I had access and I don't see you as stealing from me, I'm going to demand, I want my school to be as good as your school, which is what happens within the district schools. Neighborhoods will clamor for another testing school or a CTE school with a robotics theme or something like that. So that might get people asking for more of what the charters have, which could then give parental pressure to do more sharing.
And I think it is maybe very idealistic, but this is kind of our approach in Spring Branch, is to identify and quantify what are those experiences that parents and students are craving. What are those best practices that do yield kind of positive results for students academically and behaviorally, and then let those be options for leaders to explore and to implement, so that kids can have a different experience. And I think where we're going is trying to move away from this school is great at this, that school is great at that, to a much more personalized experience. And I think that's where we're pivoting, is how do we create the most tailored experience for every kid that's in our district, so no matter where you are, and you could not be in a school. I mean, you could literally be somewhere else and get the type of experience that meets your every single need. And so that's a different conversation, because that doesn't value a building, a location, a type of school, a charter or district, a STEM, a magnet, engineering. It's what you need, you're going to get, and our job is to figure out the best way to provide that for you. So I think the partnerships come in, it's where we can collaboratively identify what are those things that are great for kids, and how do we ensure that all of our kids, whether these kids subscribe to this CMO, or these kids are a part of this school district, that they have access to those quality experiences.
Marcia, do you want the last word on this?
So we're engaging our families a fair amount, and we've family ambassadors. We've done a big push on registering people to vote, and getting out the vote. I don't think we've tackled sort of this issue, and I think to Alex's point, there's a lot of us, them. We've seen that happen recently as it relates to Prop 39, which is our facility sharing, where we've had parents, for district parents where one of our schools might be co-located, coming and protesting either our office or at the the site where the school is. I think that's an opportunity, though, as parents, as we can educate parents more and then figure out how we build relationships and bonds across whether they're a district school or a traditional. But I don't think it's been approached from that matter or from that perspective.
We have time for 2 or 3 questions.
Are there a variety of models for this coming together? Kind of a new phenomenon, but what's going on in Texas is not necessarily the right model for LA. I'm just wondering how much has been developed in the way of unique experiences in coming together? Are there a variety of ways that are being tried successfully?
I think that's a great question, and our response would be, to bring the people that matter the most together, and those people figure out what works best for them in their context. And that's what we did. We brought 3 leaders of 3 organizations together. They sat down in rooms and they brought their teams and they figured out what a great partnership would be. And that's worked well for all 3 of us here in Houston, Texas. But I think it's just the idea of bringing the right people together. And in some cases, big cities, smaller cities where there's a lot of, politics involved, where there's a lot of money involved, that may not happen as seamlessly. And so there are a lot of different contexts. But again, it's still the idea of bringing the right people together to figure out what can be done if we are to partnership.
I think that's true, but I also think context matters, just to jump in. Building on what Alex said, when a high-performing charter school is working with a lower-performing district school in a turnaround capacity, which is one of the strategies I think we'll see more and more of under the new ESSA law, that kind of collaboration is going to look really different from what you described, Deandre. So it's not to say that it won't have the same feel at the end of the day of dedicated educators coming together to talk about outcomes for students, but some of the process of getting there might look different, and the developing of trust around that model and pieces of the model that can get implemented more easily. So
Another thing some districts are exploring, and not that I would call this sharing of ideas in the sense of like teachers sharing the way they're working within the schools, but is districts turning their schools over to let charters run them, but the schools stay under the governance of the district. So the charters get some autonomy to implement their strategies, their approach, some HR flexibility, but they still work under the budgets and accountability system of the district, and the data still goes towards the district's sort of like progress. So it's a way to kind of scratch both itches. Go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like you have to have a top-down, bottom-up approach to it, because the reality is, if our superintendent said, I want collaboration, but you've got many layers between her office on the 24th floor and the people on the at the school site, the folks in between, knowing that in LA, every few years we have a new superintendent, probably are not going to make radical change, because it's going to change again. And so figuring out how you can foster that from both angles and work to break down barriers and incent people to come together we'll need to have that happen. It can't just happen from the board or from the superintendent. We've also got to be a willingness for those on the ground.
we have time for one more question if there's anyone else. Any takers? Well, thank
Oh,
you.
there you go.
I see a hand.
Oh.
over there.
Thank you all, it's so interesting. I wasn't able to hear the entire panel, so my apologies if you've covered this, but most states, the funding models are much different for the district or the charter. Have any of you had experiences with how to pull those together?
How to what?
What the impact is of, combining your resources based on the individualized funding models?
I don't have a good answer to that.
So,
Student funding. Go ahead.
yeah, in our agreement, the district still is responsible for certain things, the charter is responsible for certain things, but what we did have to figure out, for instance, if there are students that need special education accommodations, who's going to provide those things. And so, you know, we had to figure those kind of nuances out, and so it was kind of trial and error. But we've kept the financial separate. So, you know, our district still supports financially with our financial model. The district runs schools. The charter still supports the students that they serve in their model, and then we figure out the kind of nuances.
And I'll just add, and I think to your question, and just to wrap up, the Center for Reinventing Public Education has done a lot of excellent research and also kind of on-the-ground studies of how these collaborations are working. So I would suggest them as a resource for further information, as well as Richard Whitmire's book, The Founders, which is about how the high-performing charter schools movement got off the ground and this culture of collaboration that was really part of it from the beginning. And then shameless plug, the74.org. We write a lot about these issues. We're lucky to profile the work that all the leaders on the stage are doing. So we are grateful to you for all of your efforts on the ground. So thank you, and thank you to the audience. And we look forward to chatting with you after if you have any further questions.